this time will be coming in from the north to the south of the...
Roger, buddy. Can you give me another smoke? We got Cobras on station.
Right, lead, come up on our 3. This is Tango Echo. They've ordered up some Batmen for you, and if you need them, there's 3 King Bees at Charlie November's location at your disposal. How cautious?
Do you understand?
Roger, this is temperature 4. There's somebody I realize the day is over. Yeah, look out, Rick. This is
Many wargamers will know from the movie Once We Were Young and Soldiers, starring Mel Gibson, who plays Colonel Hal Moore of the 1st 7th US Cavalry, and the battle that took place on a landing zone X-ray. This wargame looks at the operation following that, which saw Colonel McDade's 2/7th make its way through Columbus to landing zone Albany, and the subsequent ambush that took place on his battalion on the 17th of November 1965. In effect, the battle will commence with the situation as laid out on the map. The 3 MVA objectives are marked out, which is LZ Albany. Battle is effectively joined. McDade has gone forward into the small clump of trees, which is one of the objectives, where he's interrogating 2 prisoners who were captured by the recce platoon of the 2nd 7th. The remainder of the battalion is formed out in a very thin column running all the way down the path away from the LZ. The problem was that the battalion was exhausted and was carrying heavy packs, and this led to effectively a massacre on the battalion with over 150 dead. When the battalion came to rest, as McDade had gone forward with all his company commanders, the troops effectively just collapsed onto the ground. Some were smoking, some were in groups chatting, having coffee. They had no deep flankers out, they had no reconnaissance out, and unbeknown to them, there was a fresh MBA regiment lying in ambush. The battle will be joined as the MVA forces attack all along the front, from McDade's lead elements all the way to the rear company positions further down the trail. Here we can see lead elements of McDade's recce platoon screening to the northern edge of the LZ, and then in the centre in the clump is McDade with his battalion headquarters, and at this stage some support weapons, and fatally he had called forward all his company commanders just prior to the ambush being sprung by the MVA. Here we can see the lead elements of D Company, which were closest to LZ Albany just prior to the MVA ambush. Moving further down the trail, we then pick up the remnants of A Company. Beyond them, with a small break across the stream, C Company, and finally back at the rear we have B Company bringing up the rear of the column. As mentioned, the troops were heavily exhausted. They basically, when they were told to stop on the route, as the company commanders all went forward, they literally just collapsed against their packs. They had no deep flankers out, no recce forces, because they pushed forward already onto the LZ, and because they had no depth, they were extremely vulnerable to the oncoming MVA regimental assault. The MVA will be assaulting from the east through the jungle here, and this is unbeknown to the US forces. At this stage, whilst not seeing the MVA, are approximately some 200 meters and closing onto the US positions. We join the battle now as turn 1, and the MVA spring the ambush with a fuselage of RPG salvos, 120 and 81mm mortars, supported by light machine guns and the Kalashnikovs as they charge forward across the whole of the American front. There's some 5 companies of MVA striking from the rear of the position in B Company, all the way through C Company, A Company, the mortar platoon, all the way up to the front to D Company on the edge of the LZ. At the same time, both McDade's battalion HQ in the clump comes under pressure from an MVA company bursting out of LZ Albany, and the reduced recce platoon comes under sustained fire from yet another MVA company. The Americans are somewhat surprised because they can't hear any of the aviation overhead, and there was no aerial rocket artillery available, and given the proximity of the MVA to the US positions, they were also unable to call in any indirect fire from the fire support bases and had to rely on 3 81mm mortars integral to the battalion. So at the end of the ambush phase, the rear B Company got hit by heavy mortars and direct fire. They're pinned down and have 4 wounded. Moving further up the column, you then have C Company. They're pinned down from direct fire and 3 wounded. A Company are pinned down also with 3 wounded. And the lead company fortunately managed to survive the onslaught, as did the recce platoon. However, the M60 support platoon, co-located with Colonel McDade's HQ in the clump, came under both indirect and direct fire and has 1 casualty and pinned down. The American forces, with the exception of 1 company, all managed to unpin and inflict heavy damage back onto the MVA, pinning 2 of the rifle companies, and in 1 case inflicting 9 hits on them, but only 4 killed. Overall, they seem to have bought themselves some breathing space, having also managed to dig in 3 out of the 4 rifle companies. However, the MVA continued to close in, and as we move into round 2, it will be interesting to see if any assaults actually take place onto the American forces. At the end of round 2, the American recce platoon made a desperate dash to get back to McDade in the battalion CP. However, they were caught in the open and took heavy casualties, 1 killed and the platoon commander wounded. The VC are now with both MVA and irregulars preparing for a huge assault onto McDade's position. Meanwhile, up in D Company's position, they remain dug in and continue to hold off the enemy. The mortar platoon was about to fire, but has come under now direct fire from 1 of the lead platoons, which is close to overrunning the A Company position. A Company failed to dig in, and they have got 1 dead and 40% wounded on their position and are looking extremely exposed. Here in the centre, however, C Company are in a much stronger position, dug in. They've only taken 2 wounded, and they managed to pin down and stall the MVA company charging their position. However, at the rear, and probably most vulnerable, which has been under repeat 120mm bombardment, and they have 1 dead and 6 wounded, leaving only the platoon commander and 1 M60 unwounded, and they are close to being assaulted by an MVA company. Can this company hold on, and is there ability to call in a danger close artillery from the integral 81mm mortars? So as we finish the end of round 2, the rear of the column is extremely exposed. As we move into the centre, the Americans are just about holding on. Likewise, up on the edge of LZ Albany, A Company is holding a strong position, but heavily exposed. Out in the front in the clump is McDade, with only the remnants of an M60 support platoon and 50% remaining in his recce platoon. So on the extreme right flank of the column at the rear, B Company managed to hold on. The assault went in, but they took some 9 hits, but only 3 dead, pinning the MVA short of the assault. so they live to fight at least for another turn. Here in the centre, very little exchange of fire going on. Both elements are dug in. The MVA are currently pinned down, and the Americans are also pinned down and dug in from artillery fire. Here in the centre, it's much more exposed, with this platoon being heavily attrited. Fortunately, the MVA have not been able to press home their charge this round. The Americans chose to dig in and go to ground with their only indirect fire support. Here, fortunately, very little damage done on either side as the MVA position themselves for an assault, and the Americans managed to pull back the Iraqi platoon into McDade and the clump. The M60s remain pinned down from mortar fire, but fortunately the platoon commander made it to the medic and has recovered from minor injuries and is at full effect. All forces here are effectively dug in and gone to ground, waiting for a major assault by 2 companies of MVA forces, which are now poised on the edge of landing zone Albany, preparing for a major assault onto McDade's defensive position. So this is where we leave part 1. Following on part 2, we'll see the major MVA assault onto McDade's position and the subsequent follow-up assaults on the 3 companies, remembering that currently C Company, whilst has taken sustained casualties, remains not dug in and is extremely exposed to the MVA company, which is closing in on it.